as it has been announced that legendary music mogul Clive Davis has died at the age of 94.
I got into music by accident. It became my life's passion. Those words from Clive Davis perfectly summarize one of the most remarkable careers in entertainment history. On June 22, 2026, Clive Davis died at his Manhattan home at the age of 94. His family was with him. Outside, the city hummed like it always does, indifferent and relentless. Inside, the man who had shaped the sound of that city, and arguably the soundtrack of modern America itself, was gone. He had outlived scandals, comebacks, heartbreaks, and industry shakeups. Yet his influence never faded. What he left behind was extraordinary. A vast fortune, a musical legacy spanning generations, and a grieving family statement. Clive Davis was more than a record executive. He was a kingmaker and visionary whose impact on music will endure for decades. The Brooklyn Kid who became a music god. Let's set the scene. Clive J. Davis was born on April 4, 1932, in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in the Crown Heights neighborhood with his parents, Herman and Florence. His dad was an electrician and a traveling tie salesman, not exactly the kind of background that screams future music mogul. And honestly, things got much harder before they got better. By the time Clive was a teenager, both of his parents had died within 2 years of each other. He was essentially an orphan, and he moved in with his married sister in Queens. Now, here's where most people would have faded into the background, but not Clive Davis. He was sharp, and he knew it. He got himself into New York University, graduated magna cum laude in 1953 with a degree in political science. And then, this is where it gets really interesting, he landed a full scholarship to Harvard Law School. A full scholarship, from orphan to Harvard. Let that sink in. He graduated from Harvard Law in 1956 and started practicing law at a firm in New York. Pretty standard stuff. But then, fate threw him a curveball in the best possible way. His firm had CBS as a client, and through that connection, he was hired as assistant counsel for CBS's subsidiary, Columbia Records, at age 28. The man walked into the music industry through the back door of a law office, and he never looked back. He worked his way up quickly, from assistant counsel to general counsel, then to administrative vice president, and by 1967, he was president of Columbia Records, at 35 years old. The lawyer from Brooklyn was now running one of the biggest record labels in the world, and he hadn't even touched a recording console. So how exactly does a lawyer go from drafting contracts to signing some of the most legendary artists in music history? Well, buckle up, because that part of the story is insane. The Golden Ear, signing legends left and right. Here's what made Clive Davis different from every other suit in the boardroom. The man actually listened to music. Like, really listened. He had what people in the industry call a golden ear, an almost supernatural ability to hear a song or an artist and know, immediately, that they were going to be huge. During his time at Columbia, Davis signed or championed some of the most iconic names in rock history. We're talking Janis Joplin, Santana, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Aerosmith, and Earth, Wind and Fire. That's not a roster, that's a museum exhibit. He also signed Aerosmith in the early 1970s after catching them at a show at New York City's Max's Kansas City, and the band was so grateful that they actually referenced him by name in their 1979 song, No Surprise. Steven Tyler literally sang about Clive Davis, making them a star. But the Columbia chapter ended in dramatic fashion. In 1973, Davis was fired amid allegations of misuse of company funds. A Rolling Stone article from July of that year reported that CBS let him go as part of an alleged payola scandal. It was messy, it was public, and it was humiliating for a man who had just built Columbia into one of the most dominant labels of its era. Most people in that position would have quietly disappeared, maybe gone back to law, maybe taken a cushy consulting role somewhere and called it a career. Clive Davis did the opposite. And honestly, that's the most Clive Davis thing imaginable. He came back swinging. In 1974, he founded Arista Records, and what he built there is genuinely jaw-dropping. Under Arista, Davis launched the careers of Barry Manilow and Patti Smith, revitalized Aretha Franklin's commercial momentum, and signed acts that kept the label dominant for over 2 decades. But then, this is the big one. In 1983, he signed an unknown 19-year-old named Whitney Houston after seeing her perform at a small Manhattan nightclub called Sweet Waters. She was singing in her mother's cabaret act. He signed her on the spot. Now, think about what that moment meant. Davis was already one of the most powerful men in music. He didn't need a gamble. He didn't need to take a chance on a teenager who had never released a single record. But that ear of his, that instinct, told him something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. So he signed her. And then he didn't just release her music. He curated it. He helped select her songs, shaped her sound, guided her image, and stayed by her side through every album, every stadium tour, every era of her career. Whitney Houston went on to become one of the best-selling music artists of all time, with over 200 million records sold worldwide. And Clive Davis was behind every step of it. Their relationship wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, and Davis remained close to Houston until her tragic death in 2012. He was so intertwined with her story that Oscar-nominated actor Stanley Tucci played Davis in the Whitney Houston biopic I Wanna Dance with Somebody, released in 2022. Davis also served as a producer on the film. Even in her death, he was still telling her story. And Davis still wasn't done. He co-founded LaFace Records in 1989 with L.A. Reid and Kenneth "Babyface" Edmonds, and that label became a cultural juggernaut in the late 90s and early 2000s. TLC, Toni Braxton, Usher, all LaFace. Then in 2000, after leaving Arista, he launched J Records. And the name itself? He named it after his middle initial, the letter J, which he shared with his 4 children. Even the branding was personal. At J Records, he introduced the world to Alicia Keys and helped revive the careers of Luther Vandross and Rod Stewart. The music world named him the #1 A&R executive on the planet in 2001, at age 68. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, so the man was legendary, but how exactly did all of that translate into an $850 million fortune? Let's get into the money. The fortune, where $850 million comes from. Look, when people say Clive Davis left behind a staggering fortune, they're not exaggerating. According to Celebrity Net Worth, his estate is estimated at $850 million. Some sources put it even higher, closer to $900 million. And yes, the music career was the foundation. But this fortune was built in layers. Start with the obvious. Decades of executive salaries and bonuses at some of the biggest labels in the business. Davis was president of Columbia Records, founder and president of Arista Records, chair and CEO of the RCA Music Group, and chief creative officer of Sony Music Entertainment. Each of those roles came with serious compensation packages over multiple decades. We're talking about a career that stretched from 1960 all the way to the end of his life at 94. Then there's the equity. When you found a record label that becomes a powerhouse, you typically hold equity in it. Arista Records wasn't just a job for Davis. It was his company. The financial upside from that alone is enormous. But here's where a lot of people are surprised. Clive Davis was also deeply strategic about his money outside of music. He assembled an art collection that includes works by Pablo Picasso, Marc Chagall, and Andy Warhol. Art experts have estimated his collection at over $100 million by itself. And unlike cash in a bank account, art only appreciates over time. Real estate was another pillar. Davis owned a stunning Park Avenue duplex in Manhattan, one of the most expensive zip codes on the planet. He also had an estate in Pound Ridge, New York, in Westchester County. And beyond his personal properties, he founded Park Royal Capital, his own private equity firm focused on commercial real estate, with a portfolio of nearly 2,000 units in multifamily housing communities. The man wasn't just sitting on his music earnings, he was actively growing his wealth through smart investments. And then there's the publishing and royalty income. When you've spent 6 decades shaping the careers of artists who have collectively sold hundreds of millions of albums, the royalty streams attached to those catalogs are significant and ongoing. We're talking about music that people are still streaming, licensing for commercials, sampling in new records, and discovering for the first time every single day. That income doesn't stop, it compounds. For a man with Clive Davis's roster, the financial tale on that music is essentially endless. But behind all the numbers and the real estate and the art collection, there was something Clive Davis valued above everything else. And honestly, it's the thing that makes this story hit differently. The family he built. For all the glitter of the Grammy parties and the billion-dollar industry relationships, Clive Davis was, by all accounts, a devoted family man. He was married twice, first to Helen Cohen from 1956 to 1965, and then to Janet Adelberg from 1965 to 1985. Both marriages ended in divorce, but those relationships gave him 4 children, and those 4 children were the center of his world. His oldest son, Fred, born in 1960, became a prominent media investment banker and a partner at the Rain Group. His daughter, Lauren, born in 1962, is an entertainment attorney and an arts professor at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, the very program that bears her father's name, the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music. His son, Mitchell, born in 1970, became an entertainment executive and concert promoter. And his youngest son, Doug, born in 1974, became a music executive and Grammy Award-winning record producer, following directly in his father's footsteps. As mentioned earlier, Davis even named his label J Records after the middle initial he shared with his 3 sons. Family wasn't just important to him, it was woven into everything he built. He was also an incredibly doting grandfather to his 8 grandchildren and even lived to see the arrival of 2 great-grandchildren. In a 2021 birthday message, he wrote that he was spending his birthday with his children and grandchildren and was about to welcome his first great-grandchild. He added that his family, friends, and contemporary projects kept him young. In his later years, Davis shared his life with his longtime partner, Greg Schriefer, an interior designer and real estate agent. The couple divided their time between Davis's Park Avenue duplex in Manhattan and his estate in Pound Ridge, New York. Davis publicly came out as in his 2013 memoir, The Soundtrack of My Life, opening up a broader conversation about identity and authenticity at any age. When Davis passed away on June 22, 2026, at 94 years old at his Manhattan home, the family released a statement that said it all. His children wrote, "To the world, our father was the iconic music legend whose vision, instincts, and relentless pursuit of excellence shaped the soundtrack of countless lives. To his family, Clive was dad and granddaddy, the steady presence at the center of our lives, the source of wisdom, strength, encouragement, and unconditional love." They continued, "Through every chapter of his remarkable life, family remained Clive's greatest pride and deepest joy. Today, we celebrate not only a towering figure whose influence changed music forever, but the man who led our family with grace, generosity, and kindness." If that doesn't make you feel something, honestly, what will? And what about the legacy he leaves behind? Not just for his family, but for music, for culture, for the industry he basically rebuilt from the inside? The legacy, more than money. Here's the thing about Clive Davis's $850 million fortune. It's almost beside the point, because the real currency this man dealt in was influence. And on that front, the math is almost incomprehensible. Think about the artists he directly shaped: Janis Joplin, Santana, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Aerosmith, Earth, Wind and Fire, Barry Manilow, Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, Alicia Keys, TLC, Toni Braxton, Usher, Luther Vandross, Rod Stewart, Pink Floyd. These aren't just artists. They are the soundtrack to multiple generations of American life. And Clive Davis had his fingerprints on all of it. What made Davis especially remarkable was his ability to stay ahead of the curve for more than 60 years. Most music executives dominate one era and struggle to adapt when tastes change. Clive Davis somehow kept reinventing himself alongside the industry. Whether it was rock, soul, R&B, pop, or contemporary music, he repeatedly proved that his instincts weren't tied to a trend. They were tied to talent. He won 5 Grammy Awards, including the Grammy Trustees Award and the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2000 as a non-performer, which is one of the rarest and most meaningful recognitions the industry can give. You have to be considered truly transformative to get into the Hall of Fame without ever picking up an instrument yourself. He also poured money and energy back into music education. In 2002, he donated $5 million to New York University's Tisch School of the Arts to establish a music program. He donated another $5 million in 2011, and the program was renamed the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music in his honor. That program has trained generations of music industry professionals, his legacy quite literally teaching the next wave of the industry he helped create. His annual pre-Grammy Gala, which he hosted for decades, was one of the most coveted invitations in the entertainment world. Stars, executives, politicians, A-listers from every corner of the industry. Everyone wanted to be in that room. It wasn't just a party, it was a statement. If Clive Davis invited you, it meant something. If he introduced you from the stage, even more so. The gala became its own kind of institution, a night where the music industry gathered not to hand out trophies, but to simply be in the presence of the man who had shaped it. In 2025, Davis hosted the 50th anniversary edition of the event, which also served as a fundraiser for MusiCares in the wake of the catastrophic Los Angeles wildfires. Even at 92, he was still the one everyone came to see. At his most recent Grammy event, former President Barack Obama appeared via video tribute and reflected on Davis's impact on music. It was a moment that captured something essential about who Clive Davis was. A man powerful enough to draw a former president to his party, but whose real legacy lived in the songs, not the celebrity. He documented his life and philosophy in his memoir, The Soundtrack of My Life, published in 2013, a book in which he also publicly came out as bisexual, opening up a broader cultural conversation about identity and authenticity at any age. He was also the subject of the acclaimed documentary Clive Davis, The Soundtrack of Our Lives, which gave audiences a rare, intimate look at the mind behind the music. Both stand as essential viewing for anyone who wants to understand how the modern music industry was actually built. Not just the hits, but the vision, the risk, and the sheer relentless drive that powered all of it. And through it all, the scandals, the firings, the comebacks, the heartbreaks, the triumphs, Clive Davis remained at the table. Still working as Chief Creative Officer at Sony Music Entertainment well into his 90s. Still the one everyone wanted to impress. Still the man whose approval meant something. In an industry that chews people up and discards them before they hit 50, Clive Davis was still relevant, still influential, and still working at 94. That alone tells you everything you need to know about who he was. That's a legacy that no amount of money can fully capture. So there you have it, the extraordinary life, the staggering fortune, and the deeply human story of Clive Davis. From a teenager with nothing in Brooklyn, both parents gone before he finished high school, to a man worth nearly $1 billion who helped write the soundtrack of the entire modern era of music. He leaves behind 4 accomplished children, 8 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, a partner who loved him, and a world of music that sounds the way it does because he was in it. Not bad for a lawyer from Queens. If this story moved you, if you learned something new today, or if you just have a newfound appreciation for the man behind some of your all-time favorite songs, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment below. Which Clive Davis artist discovery do you think was the most significant? Whitney Houston, Bruce Springsteen, Alicia Keys? Let's talk about it. We'll see you in the next one.